I've spent the majority of my professional life sharing with others, teaching others about how to manage emotions, how to regulate emotions, how to recognize emotions, um, patterns of grief, stages of grief, um, the idea of finding peace in the midst of difficult times, being able to make choices um, that are healthy mentally and emotionally. And what I have found during this era of life that I've been living in is that it is totally different when you're dealing with it yourself. Um, Most of you know that my mother's death was um, a bit unexpected in the sense that she was not physically ill in the moment. She had some health issues. They seemed to be well managed, and we were not expecting her to pass in that moment. So it was very shocking, um, very devastating. And as I have mentioned to some people, for me, and this is just my experience, I have um, three living brothers, and I don't profess to be sharing their story because their story is their own. But in my case, from my perspective, this was certainly the worst, most devastating event that I've ever had to endure. For me, my greatest fear in life was that my mother would die and that I would not be there. I live far away from my family of origin, and many nights, most nights I would venture to say, my waking thought in the middle of the night, you know how you stir in the middle of the night, or maybe you have to get up to go to the restroom. My arresting thought was, oh my gosh, how is mama? Oh my gosh, what if mama is not okay? Oh my gosh, what if something happens to mama and I'm not there? I may have assigned this to myself, this burden, this weight of making sure she's all right. Assigned it to myself because I'm the girl, the only daughter. Maybe because I'm the youngest. Maybe because I'm a person who deals with codependency. But at any rate, in my mind, I had to be there. I had to be there. But on March 28th, I wasn't. I wasn't there. None of my siblings were there. And my mother died. And I could not believe it because so many times I had rested only because I felt I was being reassured that that fear of mine would not happen, would not come true, that somehow, miraculously, I would be there. I would be able to give my mother comfort. I would be able to allow her to know I was there and to hold her hand and watch her take her last breath and ensure that all of the medical pieces were taken care of and that the medical professionals were tending to her properly. I would be there to be her advocate. I would be there to be her defender. I would be there to demand that she gets the services that she needs. I would be there to make sure that she knew that she was loved and that she wasn't alone. But I wasn't. And it was devastating to the point that I had a reaction that I've never had before. Nothing so intense, no emotions that intense have ever occurred. No, I've never allowed myself to experience emotions to this extent. I screamed. I shrieked. I didn't even know that I had the ability to reach those octaves with my voice. I screamed. I screamed. I ran. I banged on the walls so hard that the pictures on the walls fell off. I prayed with every ounce of strength I could muster. I prayed. I was waiting on the phone for the EMS workers to tell me that my mother was okay. I was praying from the soles of my feet all the way up through the tips of my hair. I prayed, asking, begging that what was appearing to be true would not be true. I could hear the rumbling on the phone and the voices of the healthcare workers trying to rouse my mother. And I didn't hear any response. And I was listening more intently than I've ever listened for anything. I was listening for some familiar rustling, some moaning, some breathing, a snore, or something that would indicate that she was still with us. But I didn't hear it. What I heard was the EMS worker say to another worker, "She's gone." So I dropped the phone and I ran and screamed and beat the walls. And I yelled and I cursed. And I couldn't believe it, that this had happened. This thing that was my ever-present fear had happened. And I was living still. I never thought that I would live past that moment. The fear was so great that I thought that if it came true, it would kill me. I could not imagine a moment after this fear coming to pass. I couldn't even imagine or fantasize a future in which I had actually survived my mother dying and me not being there. It was unfathomable. And yet, it has happened. It has happened. My mother has been dead for 11 months. It has happened. I was not there when she died. It has happened. And I have not died. I have not been crushed. I have not been paralyzed. God has kept me. God has kept me. God has kept my sanity. God has kept my faith. God has kept my body. It is a miracle because I could not have fathomed it. It is a miracle because I could not do it. Under no circumstances could I have imagined mustering the emotional fortitude to speak at my mother's funeral. Under no circumstances could I have imagined being given the strength to purchase earrings and undergarments to be placed on my mother's corpse. Under no circumstances could I have imagined answering the questions that people would ask by saying, my mother died. The idea of speaking those words was unimaginable. I never imagined having to say those words. It sounds ridiculous. We know that we die. As my mother would say, death is a part of living. We have all lost people. But my mind would not allow me to imagine a moment in which my mother died and I was not there. And yet, it has happened. And I am still here. I am standing on the prayers of loving family members, loving friends, loving co-workers, compassionate strangers. I have been prayed up one side and down the other. And I know this because I am still here. I am still here because I am loved beyond measure. I am still sane, not because I'm a psychologist, not because I have some type of training that would allow me to cope with such loss. I am still here because of God's grace, mercy, and love. Period. And I'm grateful.